Hi, it's Rabbi Lewis wishing you an early Shabbat shalom. Ever since I recently watched the Billy Joel documentary, And So It Goes, I've done a little bit of a deeper dive into some podcast and a little reading about my favorite musician, and I learned something new, that he always had a backup band, even though he really has always been considered a solo artist, but there was always a band with him, and they actually had a name. In the late 70s, they started being called the Lords of 52nd Street. Now, that was sort of an informal name. It never was formalized. It was never, billed when they would tour, Billy Joel and the Lords of 52nd Street. But they had an identity. And in a way, the band was never just Billy, even though he was the primary songwriter and the lyricist, and generally responsible for the arrangements and compositions, but the band was always there to back him up. And it sort of brought to light this idea that really nobody is truly a solo artist when it comes down to it. A lot of the great comedians have a writing team, especially if they're on TV. There's writing a room in the background where they're helping develop the jokes. Musicians always have backup bands and producers that help them, even when they perform, backup dancers too, like Taylor Swift. I never been to one of her shows, but I've seen a lot of video, and those shows wouldn't be much without all of the other crew and cast behind her. So, right, there's no such thing truly as a solo artist, and I think that this is really an embedded Jewish value. I'm dodging a car that was backing out of a driveway. I don't want to meet my maker at the back of a Subaru. Anyhow, Jewish values, going back to even creation, God never truly acts alone. God says, let us make human in our own image. And who is God talking to? Well, we learned that, we talk about God as Adonai Tzvaot, the God of hosts. And that means that there are other heavenly entities that accompany God. Not that there's multiple gods. We're going to avoid that, right? But, we consider, according to Midrash and commentaries, that they are direct extensions of God as God's messengers, which is kind of like the same as being God without getting into all the details. That's how we avoid understanding those biblical phrases as polytheism. But the key is that not even God acts alone. And throughout our history, when God reaches out to Abraham for covenant and reaches out to Moses to be God's messenger, we find that God can't even act alone ever since the days of creation and moving forward. And in this Torah portion this week, NITZAVIM, we find that no one person should ever have to act alone, especially when it comes to this momentous act of making a covenant. Abraham was an individual making a covenant with God. At this point, we are collectively, as the people of Israel, it says, Atem NITZAVIM, you all today, the Jews that came before you, along with the Jews who will come after you, from the lowest wage earner to the most influential leader, all of you stand together today to make this covenant with me. No one person ever has to stand alone, and no one person should ever stand alone, whether it's being creative, whether it's advocating for a cause, whether it's doing just our basic work. We all need a support staff. We all need family to back us up. We all need friends to turn to when we get frustrated. That no one should ever have to be solo. And I think that's the key lesson of NITZAVIM. You all stand today. You're gathered here. Look to your left, to your right, forward, back. There's going to be somebody around you who can, if not directly support you, at least share in the struggle and help you move forward. So we will hear that Torah portion this week. We'll also hear it again on Yom Kippur. It's a good one. So let's keep studying and supporting one another. And I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.